Colleagues, over the next hour and a half, we'll have a chance to talk about what really represents a transformation of the Canadian Chamber to build an organization that is more relevant, more impactful, and more successful than we've ever been before. This is a journey on which we've all embarked together, and it's one in which we'll all succeed together. I believe as a result of Chamber 2025, and we'll set out to you over the course of the next several minutes what's involved in this, but I believe we will have a network that's stronger, that we'll be able to serve our members better, we'll serve Canada better as well, and we'll be sustaining ourselves for the future. So let's start with a deck that we've prepared, and I'll walk you through that. I'll also ask Gayla after that to present our new branding that will go hand in hand with Chamber 2025. And then we'll open it up for questions and for discussion. So could we have the next slide, please? A year ago, at the time of our AGM, the board gave a transformational mandate to management to undertake Chamber 2025. What we wanted to do was to look at a reimagined and renewed Canadian Chamber, one which could build on the success that we've had during the pandemic, but that could also position us for the future so that we would be more modern and more relevant and could play an even greater role in the future. This is, ladies and gentlemen, the single most extensive strategic planning exercise in the Canadian Chamber's history. And it represents not a redecoration of the Chamber, but a renovation of it, of rethinking our purpose and our mandate and our structure in ways to make ourselves stronger. Could we go to the next slide, please? The transformation that we're looking at is a very important one. Over the course of our lifetime as a chamber, we've been very much focused on being the voice of Canadian business. What we've learned as a result of the pandemic is that the role that we can play on behalf of the Canadian business community is much greater than that. That while advocacy and policy will remain at the core, that there are things that we can do to transform the organization to make it even more effective on behalf of the Canadian business community. So we want to move from being simply the voice of Canadian business to also becoming the undisputed champion and catalyst for business success. I'll describe over the course of this presentation some of the ways in which we're going to do this. But in summary, we'll achieve this by expanding our scope, our influence, and our impact. We'll be launching whole new divisions and offerings that deliver elevated support and value to businesses of all sizes. So there's so much that's completely new in this. And we have an ambitious target for the next 4 years of doubling our revenue base as well, which will grow the organization in terms of its capacities and its ability to serve its members, including all of the network. Next slide, please. One of the things we did at the outset was to take stock and ask ourselves, what are the strengths that the Canadian Chamber brings to our work on behalf of Canadian business? And how do we leverage those strengths and build on them for the future? Let me summarize the ones that I felt were most important. Right at the core was the breadth and the local rootedness of our unique Canadian Chamber network, the people who are in this room, the people who every day ensure that we truly represent Main Street Canada. That's a claim that no other organization in Canada can make. And it's one which goes right to the heart of our capacity to serve our members. The second is the brand itself. Canadian Chamber is known for both quality and integrity. When we make recommendations to government or when we're serving our members, we're seen as representing integrity. And we're seen as representing an organization which has done its homework, which has recommendations which are implementable and realistic, and which actually can be a help to government in terms of governing the country. We have at the Canadian Chamber level, we have what each of you have in your communities. And that's a unique power to convene, to build coalitions, and to bring together a wide range of interests at the table to work together. No other organization, whether in your own communities or in Canada as a whole, has the capacity that we have as chambers of commerce and boards of trade across Canada to bring people to the table and to marshal people's efforts in a common cause. We saw that during the pandemic. We saw it during the railway blockades. We saw it during the campaign on taxation of small businesses in Canada. And that unique strength that we have is something that is at the core of our abilities for the future. We have a reputation for advocacy that's thorough, where we've done our homework, that's nonpartisan and scrupulously so, that's responsible, it isn't simply pie in the sky, and is grounded in fact, where we've done our homework and where we're making recommendations that are actually implementable and achievable. And finally, the strength of the Canadian Chamber Network comes from our ability to represent Canadian business as a whole. There's a plethora of business organizations in Canada that represent different regions, different sectors, different sizes of business, but only the Canadian Chamber represents businesses of all sizes, all sectors, all levels. And that gives our network a unique strength on which we can build for the future. We have the next slide, please. Well, how did we do this? How did we come to where we are today? What was the process that we followed? We had an intensive 12 months of consultations. 12 months seems like a long time at the front end, but they've been incredibly busy. And what we've had is consultations, workshops, roundtables, including roundtables that many of you in the network have participated in. I want to thank each of you for doing that. We've had interviews with stakeholders, surveys, and other initiatives as well. Very grateful to our board, our members, the chambers from across the country for the input that you've given into this process, where you've shared your thoughts about what we've done well, where we can improve, and what the needs of the future are going to be. All of this research has been critical to us in informing our plan. Stakeholders range from members of the board of directors to local, provincial, and territorial chambers, individual businesses, and also meetings with next generation entrepreneurs to look at the business community of the future. We also conducted market research to determine the types of products and services that it would be most valuable to have for Canadian businesses. Could we move to the next slide, please? Well, what are some of the critical success factors in being able to implement this plan? The first is to maximize the superpower of the network. If the network is the core of our strength and the core of everything that we're doing, we need to look at ways in which we can strengthen and align the network and ensure that we are getting full value out of this unique capacity that we have. And that means that we found that in our consultations, there was very strong support for increased collaboration and cooperation across all three tiers of the network. And that people were saying, we discovered when we've been working together, whether on COVID or on a variety of issues, that when we're all pulling on the oars in the same direction, we could have an impact that no other organization in Canada can have. There was strong support for having us lead national campaigns and marketing initiatives that involved all of us, where all of us could benefit, all of us could contribute, and all of us could see our members benefiting as a result of the effort that we were making. And chambers made it clear to us that they felt that more collaboration could occur on a project or an initiative basis where there's a strategic advantage for us to work together. And that has to be at the core of what we're doing if we're going to fully take advantage of the network. Could we go to the next slide, please? If you look at the growth, I've talked about the fact that we are committed to doubling the size of our revenues within the next 4 years, which is a very ambitious target, but one which we're convinced we can hit. Some 38% of the growth in our projections will come from existing business model enhancements. Next slide, please. Of the other 62% of our growth, it will come from new revenue streams. There are 4 pillars that we lay out in the strategic plan. Pillar 1 is the first to be the first mover on thought leadership on an emerging issues. Number 2 is that we want to build the most effective business network in Canada, to be in a position where people thinking about business issues turn immediately to our network as the vehicle that they want to use to achieve their goals. The third, and Carl alluded to this in his remarks earlier, we're committed to being the Canadian business's gateway to the world. To be successful in domestic business in Canada, you increasingly have to engage on the international scene as well. And the Canadian Chamber already has a critical mass of resources here. We're determined to build on that. And fourth, and particularly exciting for us and for, I believe, those in the network, is the creation of an SME Institute for the first time, which will strengthen our presence and our capacity in terms of serving small and medium-sized businesses in Canada. So those four pillars will generate some 62% of the growth that we're looking for over the next 4 years. And it means then that what we're doing with Chamber 2025 is not simply saying we're going to do what we're doing today and maybe 3% more next year, but we're saying we're going to do what we're doing today and build on whole new activities and divisions and services that don't exist today that will allow us to be much more effective in serving you and serving the business community and serving Canada. Next slide, please. Some of the critical success factors for us, what will determine whether we're able to achieve the goals we've set for ourselves. The first is that just as business is becoming much more data-driven and has to understand the facts and figures of what's taking place in our economy, so too does the Canadian Chamber. And we're going to be putting resources into developing sources of data unlike to a depth unlike we've ever had before in the Canadian Chamber. Second item, which Carl alluded to earlier, is that we are committed to increasing our profile and our presence in Quebec. We are the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. To be truly national, to achieve our purpose, we have to have a strong presence in every part of the country. And that means in particular that we have to be an institution that represents the face of Canadian business. And as a consequence, we are going to be increasing the resources in Quebec, working in partnership with chambers in Quebec, including the FCCQ, municipal chambers throughout the province as well, and our corporate members there. We'll be looking at ways of increasing our presence in the services that we provide. We're focused on the future, and it's going to be critical for us to improve our connection with next generation business leaders. Often in our surveys, when we talk to new entrepreneurs, they weren't aware of the Canadian Chamber and what it could provide, and they weren't aware of how we could be helpful in their success. We have to do much more here, and we're determined to improving the services and increasing the outreach and bringing our new entrepreneurs, who are the next generation of leadership in Canada, into membership in the Chamber network. We've got to walk the walk as well as talking the talk. If we're talking about helping the Canadian business community to be more dynamic and entrepreneurial, we have to be at the Canadian Chamber ourselves. And that means changing the culture of the Canadian Chamber to look at our entrepreneurial DNA to be a more dynamic Canadian Chamber, and to look at how we can actually build a business and build a brand together that will not only generate revenues, but will develop products that meet market needs that are out there that our members are looking for. We need to, as Carl was mentioning, modernize our governance. This will be the first year where, as we add staff to the Canadian Chamber, where we will actually have more people on staff than we have in the Canadian Chamber's board. And one of the commitments the board of directors has is to look at what we can do to increase the engagement of our board of directors, to make it even more effective than it's been, and to tap into the skills and the knowledge of these extraordinary men and women who serve, who give so much of themselves on our board. So that will be a key part, led by Mary Ontario and by the board of directors, but assisted by management over the course of the next year. And finally, looking at our business model itself to enhance it and improve it and ensure that that we can, in the most efficient way possible, serve our members and continue to grow the business. Next slide, please. We revisited our vision and our mission. Mary Jane may refer to this a little bit later when we talk about our refreshing our brand. But it's important, first of all, to have a clear sense of what our vision is. Our vision of Canada is of a Canada of thriving business opportunity, a strong economy, and a better life for all. And our mission, which will be our focus every day, is to drive change, to partner broadly, including with our network and others, and to be a catalyst for the future of business success. And those words, catalyst, future, and business success, are all critical. They're all put in there very deliberately. We have to be an agent of change. We have to be future-oriented as an organization. And our focus, our raison d'etre, is the success of Canadian business. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Looking at, I mentioned earlier that there are 4 pillars for growth around which this strategic plan is built. The first one is that we will be the first mover on thought leadership and emerging issues. First is that we will create a business data lab. And our goal is to ensure that this lab is an indispensable source of information, both for the Canadian business community, but also about it. So when people are looking at developments that are taking place within the economy and within the business community, that we have the richest resource available in Canada for them to go to, but also that in serving our members, that we have the sort of data which they need to be able to be successful. And this will be very helpful to the Canadian Chamber network as well, as you're looking at how you serve your members. You'll be an integral part of that. Second is that we will have a Canadian Chamber Future of Business Center. And the purpose of that is to bring timely research on thought-provoking concepts and ideas in the business world. And we want to make sure the policy process in which we're engaged at this conference is a consensual process where we require 2/3 majority to agree on our policies, and this will remain at the core of our advocacy. But we believe we also have a responsibility to look into the future and to introduce often edgy new ideas that the business community and the government should be talking about. And one of the things that we want to do is be on the leading cutting edge of many of these ideas to stimulate debate and discussion in Canada and help both government and business to be able to plan successfully for the future. Can we move to pillar 2, please? We're determined to build the most effective business network in Canada. We will create a small business access pass. And this small business access pass will give no-cost access to the Business Data Lab and to the SME Institute for chambers across Canada. And we'll create no-cost access to the Canadian chamber community, which we'll be creating for chambers and for your members as well. What we want to do is to strengthen the value that you can add and offer to your members, which in turn strengthens us if you can do an even better job in serving your members on Main Street, Canada. The Canadian Chamber community will be a platform to facilitate B2B connections, and we'll seek advice, resources, referrals, and leads using that tool. You'll be an integral part of that. We'll also be partnering with others to create opportunities. We'll be broadening partnerships with external organizations to support business success. We've done that with a number of businesses over the course of the pandemic, but we've also partnered. We have over 100 associations that belong to us as well as association members, in addition to the around 450 chambers and boards of trade across Canada. And we will look to partner and to strengthen those relationships to build a business network that's even more effective than the one that we have today. The third pillar, next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, we want to ensure that the Canadian Chamber serves as a causeway to the rest of the world. What we want to do with Canadian business increasingly having to deal with competition from outside of Canada, but also increasingly seeing the world as this market, is we want to be a bridge that enables Canadian businesses to function effectively in this environment. We'll leverage international platforms for policy and for our advocacy. Our goal will be to shape policy, and we'll gather intelligence on emerging issues globally. We'll create a network of Canadian chambers abroad. Many of you are aware of AmChams, which exist around the world, which is a formal relationship with the US Chamber of Commerce. They're Canadian chambers of commerce in much of the world, but there's no formal relationship they have with us. We'll be looking at building a more formal relationship with Canadian business organizations abroad, which will allow us to enhance the value of services that we're offering to Canadian businesses that are looking internationally. On Carnet, which is a long-standing service, we'll be focused on marketing, on service upgrades, and on complete digitization of the product. We want to ensure that we have the most modern product, most easily accessible product available in the world, and we're convinced that there's a major market out there that we can exploit even more fully in the future. And on document certification, we want to drive exporters to apply for COs via TradeCert Canada, and to encourage chambers to offer ECOs to their members and to exporters. So we want to have, again, the most modern product available and the one that's most useful to members from across Canada. Pillar 4, please. I'm particularly excited about the SME Institute. It will include a small business data lab. Our goal there is to provide SMEs with fresh data and insights from the Business Data Lab. We'll be elaborating on that with you in coming days as we work to set that up. We'll be looking in conjunction with you to provide networking, training, and consulting services. Our goal will be to help SMEs with professional development. We've heard from so many of them that they often need a guide or they need a helper to assist them to prepare for the future and to make the transition to business success. We want to help them with networking, with best business practices. We also want to play a key role. Our network has already done that, but we want to build on that and accelerate it, of the digitalization of SMEs in Canada. We want to help SMEs to be able to go online, to adopt digital tools, and to access new markets as well. We've seen that proceeding, and it's been critical over the course of the pandemic. The pace of change on the importance of SMEs going online and being able to market internationally and serve their customers digitally is simply going to accelerate. So we want to be part of that and helping that to happen. Can we move to the next slide, please? The transformational journey starts now. It's already underway. We will start with a dynamic new visual identity, which will help to convey some of the excitement which we and the team are feeling, and to present to our members, present to the government, present to the business community across Canada, a new visual identity and brand narrative that we'll be launching formally in early 2022. It'll be the external expression of our entrepreneurial agility and our broadened ambition to shape the future of business. And we're going to give you a sneak peek of it today. With that, let me turn it over to Gayla Brock-Woodland, who is our Chief Operating Officer, to walk you through the rebranding. Gayla?
Thanks, Perrin. We're delighted to share this very important part of Chamber 2025. We've been working since last spring to create a dynamic new brand, and we'll launch it in January to signal the start of our transformational expansion. This process has been strongly supported by our brand advisors, Hambly and Woolley, who are here today to show you our new brand expression. I've had the pleasure of working with Hambly and Woolley as part of various teams and other companies and organizations over the years. They have outstanding experience, and they've been really valuable partners in this process. Next slide. Next slide. We want to thank everyone who participated in the brand development process. As you'll see from the slide, the discovery and research phase involved interviews and group discussions with chamber leaders, directors, and members, as well as representatives of provincial and local chambers. Our brand advisory team was made up of representatives of all of these groups, and they played a pivotal role in providing guidance and added expertise. So I want to say a sincere thanks to members of the board and chamber network who were part of our advisory team, and that included Carolyn Hughes, Fiona Murray, Debbie Nicholson, Felix Rayom, Mary Oterio, and Penny Wise. I'll turn it over now to Mary Jane from Hambly and Woolley, who will speak briefly on the brand positioning, vision, and mission before moving to Dominic, who is going to reveal our new brand.
Thank you, Gayla. Good morning, everybody. Delighted to be here to talk about the brand strategy. I know you're all probably quite eager to see the visual identity, so I won't delay that any longer than necessary. But wanted to communicate that all the creativity behind that visual expression comes from a strong rationale, a strong brand strategy, and a strong link to Chamber 2025 that Perrin just took you through. So at the heart of every great brand is a great answer to the question, why us? Why partner with us? Why be a member? Why listen to our advice and counsel? Why sponsor us? Why work with us? You need that strong and ringing answer to that question. So when we went out and did the consultation that Gail had just referred to, we kept hearing about those assets that Perrin just talked about, that broader community, that sense of connectedness, that ability to convene. We heard from members, from our peer chamber partners, from other stakeholders, that we have the largest and most activated business network in Canada, and that there are things we can do together that we simply cannot do alone, no matter the size of our business or the sector we're in or the part of Canada that we're in. So our why us, our answer to that question is the ability to generate more insight from that scale, to have broader influence on the issues that matter, and to make a bigger impact in Canada and in the world. So it's a promise about our kind of collective ability to define and benefit from the future of business. So this idea of the future of business, which you've now seen in Chamber 2025, really gets to the heart of, what's next, being agile and responsive to that, leading with a vision, but also very practically making it happen. And by business, we don't just mean, our business, but it means my business as a member, as an individual participant in the network, as a chamber. It means our business community, and it really reaches up to that higher level of meaning around the future of Canadian business and where we're going collectively. Next slide, please. The brand should also convey a kind of a sense of the experience we want to create for anyone who interacts with us. So, what's it like to be connected in any way, in any touch point with the Canadian Chamber? How should that shape what we do and how we do it? So our aspiration is to create experiences where we are the ally. We're tough when it's needed and candid and straightforward, but we're partnering and walking with our network. We're optimistic and assertive, so really leading with insight, that entrepreneurial agility that Perrin talked about in our culture, increasingly in our culture. Very action-oriented, so this is a very practical, not just a theoretical organization, and of course contemporary. And we hope that you see these qualities very much reflected in the visual identity that Dom is going to share with you in a few moments. Next slide, please. Perrin just shared with you the new vision and mission, and he may have stolen my thunder a little bit on that, but I'm glad he shared it. What I'd like to do is just talk a bit about why we did that work. And many of you are probably also grappling with the vision and mission of your respective organizations as you respond to new realities emerging around you. And it was really time for the Chamber to do that as well. So next slide, please. The first question we asked ourselves is what are vision and mission statements? Can we agree on even the job that these statements are meant to do? And we feel strongly that a vision statement is a really high level idea about the future that unites our stakeholders around a shared outcome. It's really our why. So it's not, our vision is to be the top national chamber of commerce in the world. I mean, that's a very limited idea. We want it to be a big shareable idea. And then the mission states what our role is in achieving that vision. So it's the what and the how we do it. So on the next slide, you'll see these new statements that Perrin shared with you. Our vision is a Canada thriving business opportunity, a strong economy, and a better life for all. So that's not just something that the Canadian Chamber aspires to. It's something that everyone in our network and all our stakeholders can contribute to. And our mission is to drive change, partner broadly, and be a catalyst for the future of business success. So those active ideas that Perrin talked about, an important sort of driving role for us, but in plain language and in a simple statement that people can relate to. That's what I wanted to cover, and I will hand it over now to Dominic.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Mary Jane. I'd also like to extend a thank you to Gayla and to Perrin as well. On behalf of my business partner, Gord Woolley, and our design team, we've been incredibly honored to be involved in this project. I think what we're about to reveal really builds off the platform that Perrin had outlined in Chamber 2025, talking about the pillars. We are looking at a few things that have come out of there. But if we go to the next slide, one of the things that was important to us is we authored in collaboration with the Chamber a design brief, a creative brief for what's about to be revealed. And out of that design brief, we always look for a series of objectives. And I think probably, there were quite a few things on there, but I think our team really concentrated on 5 major objectives. One was obviously the conversation that's been happening today around transformational change and what's happening with the Chamber. Also, all of you, the most activated business network in Canada. It was important as we really thought this through and had the conversations with the brand advisory team and understood more about the Chamber and understood more about the vision for the Chamber, that we really were honest about the fact that this was a visual identity that is for the Chamber, but it's also for its network. We wanted to talk about an ownable promise of value as well. Within the visual identity, we wanted to create something that had a lot of elasticity, had a lot of a lot of possibility built into it for the internal team. One of the things that was very important again in that collaboration was the activation of this visual identity, as Perrin alluded to in 2022. And we wanted to make sure that we had really considered the warmth of the brand as we've talked about the Chamber, as you've heard over the course of the AGM and today. We really wanted to look at the brand becoming something that was exciting, that showed the possibility and showed the transformation that was happening. And looking at warming it up, we wanted to kind of, separate it from maybe an older belief of being this sort of governmental organization and really talk about it being about business, the future of business, as Mary Jane said, across Canada. And simplifying segment. And what that really means is that we wanted to create something that was immediately engaging, immediately had impact, but we also wanted to look at the fact that we were talking about this network and we were talking about all of the chambers across Canada. So really looking at something that was sort of a clean and direct visualization of the transformation that is ahead. So if we go to the next slide. This is the primary mark for the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. As you'll see right away, it's bright and vibrant. We talked about the idea of simplicity. There's a cleanliness to the mark itself. It really builds off the transformation, as I say, but we wanted to build in an optimism through the color palette that you see. We really wanted to look at, again, that strength. The mark, the symbol, is built from 3 C's, so 3 half circles representing the 3 C's in Canadian Chamber of Commerce. We're very lucky to have in English and French the same 3 C's. So that really helps sort of unify the symbol itself. The other thing you'll see too is that the symbol is one of strength. It's one where the 3 C's have come together to create this sort of externalized frame, but the C's themselves are reaching outward. It's about an engagement, it's about an outward conversation. It also talks about seats. It talks about sort of seats at the table. It talks about the conversation between federal, provincial, municipal. And we then coupled that with a very clean but warm setting of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. The typography next to it is in a slate gray. We wanted to go with something that still had sort of the stateliness and the impact while marrying it to this bright, exciting symbol. And the one thing that we don't exist in anymore in 2021 is a world where the logo is just sort of slapped on pieces. We want to think about the logo as a module experience. We want to think about it and the way that it can sort of, we can start to take it apart and start to think about how it can work. As I say, really, really considering the internal team at the Chamber and really starting to kind of, I used the word elastic earlier, but really start to look at its growth. And if we go to the next slide, you start to see kind of the revving of the engine, if you will. We take the C and we use it in multiple ways. We are using it in a sense as a sort of an overlay, a watermark in the first piece, where we can use it in a way to talk about the foreground and the background and the impact of the Chamber. We're using brighter human photography. We're using photography in this case that really zeroes in on people, really looks at faces and talks about the boldness and the impact of all levels of business. We wanted to look at, as I say, sort of igniting the palette and really playing with the colors. So you'll see on the right where we've included sort of the larger C, where I talk about taking it apart. We're using it in this case as a lens, as a mechanism to sort of deliver these great photographs, this moment of this great entrepreneur in thought. And then anchoring it, one of the things that's important as well is a logo can work in color, but we also have to work out how it's going to work in its sort of simplest forms in black, and also in this case in white, anchoring the page. If we go to the next slide. We're looking at then how do we look at the marketing? How do we marry that with the typography? I mentioned earlier that the typography has this sort of clean, stately feel to it, but we didn't want to lose the warmth that we talked about, the warming up of the brand. So you'll see that it's a very open typeface. We're using typefaces that are, we're using lettering and typefaces that really marry to the C's and the modular aspect of the mark, but really actually pull people in and engage people, even by using these sort of large washes of color. If we go to the next slide, looking at how we can, looking at internal reporting systems and external reporting systems, we have to make sure that we sort of, have battle tested the mark. In this case, on the left, we look at how we can use the lenses again in its purest form, sort of all three C's, and allowing this sort of insight to what's to business in Canada. And if you look at the one on the right, where we've anchored the logo in the top corner, where we're using this sort of central impact photograph. And we've even been able to sort of integrate, last year's annual report theme, prepare, persevere, and prosper, to think about how we can move this forward, to think about how we can put marketing and put language into the system itself. If we go to the next page. Of course, we need to think about the day-to-day existence. So we also are working with the team to start looking at how the brand will impact all of the information that you as members of the Chamber receive through the e-marketing, through the newsletters that come, and considering, again, just adding in that warmth using that color palette within the typography. And we don't exist anymore, if we go to the next slide, in a world where everything just exists obviously in print. We are looking obviously at digital as well, and how the mark really starts to play out within social media. The transformation of the Chamber is something that involves all medium, and its outreach is on all levels. And we want to make sure that we are really considering that as we go through. So just to bring it all together, if we go to the next slide, I'd like to reveal to you the new visual brand, and these are all of the pieces that are working through. If we go to the next slide, you start to see how it coalesces, how it's playful, how it's warm, how it's engaging, and again, really about the transformation of the Chamber. When we undertook this project, it was important to us on the level that I think we didn't understand until we got into it. This isn't a mark that is ours anymore. This isn't a mark that's about, our authorship. It's about you. It's about the Chamber. It's about the growth of the Chamber. And this is really bigger than us, to be honest with you. It's bigger than a lot of us. And I think one of the things is it's important that this becomes representative, not just of the Chamber, but of you as well. So I'd like to thank you for your time today. And I'd like to pass it over to Carl, who's going to continue on with the panel discussion.
Thank you. And thank you all. I don't know about you, but this is really exciting. Every time I look at this new brand image and these new logos and the creativity around that, I find it just amazing and very, very exciting. Obviously, I often say brand, sort of a branding is not a strategy and a strategy is not a branding, but what a great way to launch sort of the new transformative strategy that Perrin and Gayla have presented and that we're going to be talking about. So thank you, Perrin. Thanks, Gayla, Mary Jane, and Dominic. You've obviously done a wonderful job capturing the transformational journey the Canadian Chamber is about to undertake to become, as we've been saying, the undisputed champion and catalyst for the future of business success. As I said before, these are exciting times for the Chamber. I'm energized by these changes, and I believe that working together, we will maximize the superpower of our entire Chamber network to be an even bigger champion and yet catalyst for business success. Alors bonjour et rebonjour pour ceux qui n'étaient pas avec nous ce matin. Pour ceux qui ne l'étaient pas, mon nom est Carl Tabac. Je suis associé directeur du Québec pour McCarthy Tétrault et nouveau président du conseil d'administration de la Chambre de commerce du Canada. So good morning. I am, for those who don't know me, Carl Tabac, managing partner Quebec for McCarthy Tétrault, and the newly elected chair of the Canadian Chamber. And I'm delighted to be moderating this panel discussion on the Chamber 2025 strategic plan. Joining me are the Canadian Chamber's President, our CEO, Perrin Beatty, our now past chair, very recently, Mario Theriault, and our Chief Operating Officer, Gayla Brock-Woodland. So we will be taking questions from the audience following this panel discussion. As Catherine mentioned earlier, to ask a question, please click on the podium with the word questions written on it, located on the virtual stage next to the screen. So a Slido screen will pop up when you can enter your question. So without further ado, let's get started. Question for Mario. Je vais commencer avec toi, Mario, tout d'abord. Under your leadership as board chair in this past year, you and I were both part of asking Perrin, Gayla, and the Canadian Chamber's leadership to deliver a bolder, transformational vision that would significantly expand the Chamber's impact. It's not exactly a given that an organization would undertake the most extensive strategic planning exercise in its history in the middle of a pandemic. But I think it may have been Winston Churchill who once said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." Well, the Chamber surely didn't do that. I want to ask you, why does the Canadian Chamber need to embark on a growth plan now? And what do you see as the biggest benefits of Chamber 2025?
Thanks, Carl. I guess we all agreed there's a bunch of factors that prompted this initiative, and I just want to reassure folks that we didn't go out on a limb, or it wasn't a flippant exercise, or that we thought we should just start anew. There's a bunch of factors, external factors happening around us. For example, it might not be obvious, but for example, the federal government is sort of abdicating on its policy responsibility. Governments of many stripes, maybe because they're in minority territory more and more often, they seem to be less interested in that. And concurrently, our policy work was being appreciated and congratulated by our colleagues and our stakeholders that we were dealing with. So we were saying, okay, there seems to be an opportunity. There's a disinterest on the traditional providers of policy, and yet there's an opportunity for this deep reflection based on data and deep knowledge of the economy. So that's one example of an external factor where we thought we could sort of benefit from. Obviously, our confirmed relevance during the COVID crises that we're still sort of crossing, but hopefully there's light at the end of the tunnel, really sort of revealed, like the pandemic revealed many other things, like frontline workers were constantly overlooked. And then when we were in crisis, well, they were the ones that we'd want to turn to. but the community chambers are understanding of the economy, the role of entrepreneurs in Canadian society, the role of business in Canadian society. All of those issues were issues where we had front row seats, and sometimes we were sort of not always recognized, we felt, as one of the preeminent voices on the Canadian economy. So that translates, I guess, in a team willingness to amp up our presence or to take our seat at the table. So those are just a few external factors, but there were also internal factors. And Perrin alluded to some also in his presentation. Like, our revenue was flat for a bunch of years before COVID, and we've been growing in this crisis. So we needed to find ways to leapfrog the size of our organization and give ourselves the means of our ambition. Our governance structure won't win a prize for modernism, that's for sure. And you can all relate to this. We have a board of 52 people, which can be very hard to engage. It can be unruly to manage. And it doesn't always provide the sense of board members that they're contributing to the maximum of their skill set or to the maximum of their potential. So we are looking for ways to modernize our governance, to provide yet more value to the network, more value to the board members, and to have and be more nimble, like organizations today strive to be, while at the same time pursuing this ambitious agenda. And the other little example I'll use, and it might sound like semantics, but migrating from policy to data is truly exciting to me, because data is really, we plant ourselves very much in the information economy as the Canadian Chamber. Who owns data owns potentially the insights, and who owns the insights owns the influence. And data is not just a collection of stats. It can also, it informs policy, but we could maybe scratch our heads and find ways to monetize data or to share data, provide data to the local chambers so that they can be more insightful in their own advocacy work. So I think there was the perfect storm, if I may use a bad metaphor, for opportunity. And for all of those reasons, we decided to take the leap and commission this plan with Perrin and Gayla to try to double in size, be more influent, be the thought leader that we think we are, migrate from policy to data, build a new brand, et cetera, et cetera. So the time is now, and as you've seen, I think, and as Carl said, I'm very, very excited with our initiative and with the quality of the work that the team has generated.
Yeah, thanks, Mario. I agree. These are it is a fascinating plan. It is a very sort of forward-looking plan, and what you said about data could not be more true in today's. Anyone who's managing a business today, or any entrepreneur will tell you that data is becoming a key asset for any business. I want to turn to Gayla now. And Gayla, as COO, you and the executive management team obviously did a lot of work to think through the strategies for growth in Chamber 2025, but also the implementation details of bringing this plan to life. So what are we going to see in terms of how the Canadian Chamber looks now and how it's going to look in the future? And I'm going to be asking you this several times. When are we going to start seeing these changes?
Thanks, Carl. Well, you'll start to see the changes almost immediately in Q1 2022. It's important to note that the majority of our expansion is going to be based on the new offerings that have been highlighted by Perrin. And they're going to support directly the Chamber network in meeting the needs of business. So we're already starting to stand these new offerings up. So we're already out of the gate. One of the first things you'll see in Q1 is the start of the Business Data Lab. And that'll be built in partnership with Stats Canada. And it'll put us at the forefront in delivering business trend forecasts and insights. We'll also stand up the Future of Business Center, providing thought leadership on emerging issues and anticipating the issues of the future. So this will be a real hub for thought leadership that brings together business and economic stakeholders. And in Q2, you're going to see the launch of our SME Institute with key offerings that are completely tailored to small business and the Chamber Network who serves small business. So this will be data on small business, but importantly, totally new networking, training, and consulting services. These are going to be tailored to SMEs. They're going to be delivered in partnership with best-in-class experts. And this is going to be a one-stop shop where SMEs can support their success in terms of scale up and also international trade. And of course, in Q1, you're going to start seeing the Chamber of tomorrow with a launch of our new brand. And that's going to show up on all the key platforms, our website. And also, this is going to include enhanced value propositions that are customized for every audience. So while we're going to get better at broadcasting to all businesses, you're going to see us do a better job of narrowcasting to make sure we make stronger connections and always on relationships with every audience segment. And in particular, next generation business leaders who are driving the future of business.
Thanks, Gayla. And you know, I just want to mention one thing here is, you know, while I was preparing for this and working closer with you and with Perrin and with Mario, the one thing that I want our members to be aware of is the tremendous talent that we have in the Chamber and you know, sort of the talent that you've been able, Gayla and Perrin, to not only attract, but retain and mobilize to put together that plan, but also to have a clear vision as to, you know, when it's going to happen, what's going to happen. Obviously, you know, one of the tasks on the board is going to be to hold you a bit accountable to that. But I'm you know, I'm very impressed by the quality of the talent that we are having here at the Chamber. Perrin, I just want to turn over to you now. And during the pandemic, obviously, the Chamber offered not only a voice for Canadian business to ensure critical supports like we can think of wage subsidy, the rent subsidies, but you also offered a helping hand to ensure business survival with other programs and tools. And can you just tell us a bit, how did that experience, if any, impact the size and the scope of the strategic plan?
Carl, it was a central part of the development of Chamber 2025. So if you look at what we did during the pandemic, we engaged, first of all, with our traditional role of policy and advocacy. We reached out to the federal government. We talked to them about the policies that needed to be in place to assist the business community or to assist chambers across the country. But we also recognized that the very survival of so many of these businesses, and particularly SMEs, required that we go beyond simply urging government to act, and that we had to act ourselves and provide services and products that would be of value to them, starting with information, how people could prepare, how they could become more resilient under COVID. Direct assistance that was provided. You think about the Salesforce grants, where $600,000 was made available for us to give to SMEs across the country, and $10,000 grants to SMEs to help to keep them afloat. And then other services that we provided in conjunction with the network. What we drew from this is, if we wanted to go to this fundamental question of how could we be more than simply being the voice of business, telling others what they should be doing, but in fact be a champion and a catalyst of business success, how would we have to change and what would we have to do? And were there new tools that we could provide for the business community, whether directly or through our network, to assist in their success? And we decided that it was important for us not to neglect or downgrade. We will in fact put more money and more resources into strengthening our policy and advocacy, but that we would add new divisions and new services and new assistance that could help to provide direct help to chambers and to businesses across the country and their business success. So that's how it's really, our experience during the pandemic has informed the shape of Chamber 2025.
Yeah, thanks, Perrin. And I just want to bounce on your example of how, we were instrumental to SMEs particularly. Et Mario, je vais me tourner vers toi. Là, je sais comment c'est important pour toi, le dossier des PME. You've been a champion for the concept of an SME Institute and more data on small business. What do you hope the data strategies in Chamber 2025 will achieve?
I think we have a long ways to go in our understanding of what we call SMEs. For example, businesses with 100 or less employees represent almost 98% of Canadian businesses, which is basically close to the whole of the Canadian employers. And employees who work in businesses of less than 100 people represent something like 70% of the workforce. So this is not an SME issue, it's a Canadian economic issue. That's the nature of our economy. It doesn't mean that we don't, for example, we don't need the help of our members and to focus on our large corporate members or Suncor and Air Canada and RBC and TD and so on. But it means that we need to understand our economy as a whole. And maybe it's just a personal gripe that I've always had, but we always tend to say, when we say SME, we almost tend to hear, oh, poor little SME. Well, some have their own set of struggles, and many of us do. Having said that, some are doing very, very well, thank you. Some are exporting. Some are digital and innovation ready. Some are not. So do we have those numbers? Do we have this insight of how we could be helpful to them? Could we connect SMEs with other SMEs across the country and across the globe with the new international initiatives that Perrin alluded to? For example, SMEs tend to compare and congregate around their geography. So if I'm based in Moncton, I'm very familiar with my friend entrepreneurs down the street, but maybe there's someone in Vancouver with the exact same business model as I have, but I've never met that person. So maybe the chamber could, or that institute could serve as a connector. Also a connector between the SMEs and the large corporate. So how could an innovative SME improve the supply chain of CN or Air Canada or Suncor? And how could we use these sort of friendly relationships amongst Canadian entrepreneurs, big and small, to amp up our economy? So I think the more granular view we have of the SME market, the better handle we will have around our understanding of the Canadian economy. And then that will lead in turn to better advocacy, better policy, better initiatives, and more relevancy to the chamber. So I just see the SME sort of lens as a prism, something we look through to understand the Canadian economy with other sort of key metrics and dynamics.
Yeah, thanks, Mario. It certainly is a concept we need to refine and define. You've mentioned, businesses of less than 100 employees. Some of those are, valued at, hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars in today's digital economy. And obviously they have needs that are different than a similar business that is, that has needs or challenges from an export perspective, for instance. And I think the Chamber SME Institute will need to be nimble enough to differentiate and to tailor the solutions or the offering to the needs of a changing economy that we no longer just account for by the number of employees. So Gala, this is a great plan. Obviously, you must have thought about the risks there. What are the risks? But also, how do we know that we can be successful in achieving such an ambitious growth goals?
Well, I had a client that liked to use the expression reason to believe. And I think that we have a lot of reasons to believe that we'll be successful in reaching our goals. I can speak to a few of them. The first is we did our homework. This year-long process was built on research and consultation at literally every step in the development of the plan. So we did a deep landscape analysis. We looked across the world at best-in-class practices of other chambers of commerce. We looked at the competitive landscape in terms of where our biggest opportunities were and things that we could uniquely own because of the power of our network. Then we tested, we retested, and I might add that we're going to continue to do that kind of research and testing along the way as we stand up all of these offerings. The other thing to say is we're not going ahead on any of the strategies until we have confirmed funding. So we're already highly engaged in confirming that funding. So there's virtually no risk in any of the new initiatives because we won't go ahead without it. The other thing, and I know Perrin talked about it, is this is not a cold start. We've been incredibly innovative this past year, launching whole new programs on products, and that's going to result in us significantly overachieving our goals this year, including our revenue goals. So while this plan involves 40% membership growth over the 4 years, we've become extremely agile at launching new tools and programs to meet emerging business needs. And I think the final thing I'd say is I think the bigger risk is in not having ambitious goals, because we know from our research what we need to do to support business success in whole new ways. And this means getting a lot closer to next generation business leaders. And our research showed they don't know us as well. And so a lot of the offerings in this plan, they're loaded up to specifically serve the needs of next generation high growth businesses.
Yeah, I think that is a great point, Gaila. And I'm mindful of time, and I want to leave enough time to get your questions as well. But maybe one last question to Perrin. I mean, we continue to work in a business landscape that, quite frankly, none of us ever imagined. 18 months ago, we would have probably been discussing something completely different. So it's hard to even know what the next quarter looks like, it seems. So what makes you confident that we can look at 4 years ahead with this Chamber 2025 strategic plan?
Carl, that's the critical question. There are no guarantees in this life where the only certainty is change, and that the pace of change is continuing to accelerate. And that means that in building a plan, we, yes, had to build on the foundations that we had, but we had to look at how could we anticipate some of the needs the business community, government, other stakeholders were going to have in the future. Now, the lessons that we learned from the pandemic were that there is a need for an organization like this, but it has to be an organization that's more supple, that's more entrepreneurial, it's more market-driven, that is very much focused on what our stakeholders are looking for and how the nature of business in Canada is evolving. So the strategic plan creates a direction for us. It creates an architecture. We'll continue to evolve that as we go along over the course of the next few years. And as conditions change, we will as well. But we believe that what we're building here is a foundation which will enable us and enable our network to serve the Canadian business community more effectively than ever before, and that we can build on the momentum that was created by the pandemic. And I can tell you in all honesty that as we went into the pandemic, none of us knew what to expect. It was entirely possible that our organization or that others wouldn't be able to survive. We have come out of the pandemic more relevant, stronger, and more successful than ever before. And I believe that this tells us that if we're willing to embrace change, if we're willing to work with partners, if we're willing to anticipate the developments that are taking place in the Canadian business landscape, we can be even more successful in the future.
Absolutely, I think you put it very well, and it is, I think we've kind of turned the page, and the organization is forward looking. The organization is not going to go back to before. We don't quite know what the future holds. And you know, I often say strategic planning is, you know, once you do a plan, there's one certainty is that things aren't necessarily going to go around, according to plan. But if you don't have a plan, you're pretty darn sure that you're not going anywhere. And I think that we've got we've got an exciting plan. You're going to have to tweak it. You're going to have to react to events. I think politicians like to say they react to events as they unfold. But I think business leaders also will have to react to events as they unfold. But we've got a great blueprint. We've got a great canvas to work with, and that is certainly very, very exciting.
Carl, we're very proud of what the chamber movement has achieved to date, but the best is yet to come. And it's an exciting future for all of us. We'll succeed by working together and by being bold.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I want to now just open the floor and to questions, and Perrin is going to take those questions. To ask a question, you can click, as I said, on the podium with the word questions written on it. That's located on the virtual stage next to the screen. A Slido screen will pop up where you can enter your questions. So Perrin, over to you.
Great, thanks very much, Carl. We have a number of questions that have come in already, and what I will do is to read the question, and then I'll turn to colleagues or offer some of my own thoughts. And we'll try to get through as many of these as possible over the course of the next 22 minutes. First one is from Jason from the Alberta Chambers. How will Canadian Chamber of Commerce be working with the Chamber Network on the B2B platform, SME Data Lab, and digitization, incorporating existing assets and technologies to support network collaboration on these initiatives? And thank you, Jason. It's a really important question. I'll turn to Gail on that, but I'll just preface it by saying one of the things that was so obvious to us during COVID was that we succeed together or we fail together. The success that we had in serving the Canadian business community came from our collaboration with the network, and we stepped up the intensity of that collaboration, whether it was in delivering services directly to businesses or in sharing information among ourselves, and the weekly calls that the regular calls that we made throughout the pandemic and throughout the election, the use of the information that was provided to us by the network, and also the information that we could provide to businesses across the country using the network. This is a unique tool. There are resources that each of you bring to the table, and our success will be built by incorporating those, building on them, strengthening them, and making sure that your capacity to represent Main Street Canada is made all that much greater. But Gayla, let me turn to you to talk about specifically about some of these instruments and how we will work with the network.
Yeah, well, the entire plan is built 100% on collaboration with a network. So nothing in this plan happens without that collaboration. So we want to make it very clear that we're going to be starting immediately to engage again on all of these strategies and to talk through all the collaboration that will be essential. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to provide assets that enrich your capability to serve business. So if you want to think about this, it is assets that you can reapply, but it's also bringing us all together in delivery of those assets. So if you're looking at something like the SME Institute, we'll be driving the data that you can use, but we'll also be working with you to determine, to calibrate all the offerings that are in that so that you can say, yes, this is going to be valuable. So we've got the research that we did that shows us what SME leaders are looking for in support. For example, none of you will be surprised to learn that their #1 pain point is talent recruitment. Well, this is something that we currently don't offer as a chamber, is any support in an area like that. So we'll be working with best-in-class experts to help us deliver a product, and that's going to help you in serving your members with their #1 pain point.
I would just add to that as well that one of the things that we'll be doing is reaching out to you for initiatives that you've been taking. It may be possible for us to take something that's being done by a local chamber or by a provincial or territorial chamber and take it national with your collaboration, so we can provide services right across the country and strengthen what you are offering. So it's exciting, and it can only take place through collaboration. Gail, the next one we'll put to you as well. It's from Ken Cobley with Alberta Chambers. Will small businesses that participate in the CCC All Access Pass at no charge be required to maintain and retain membership in a community chamber? If not, how will you ensure that those folks remain connected to their local chamber? We've talked about the importance of these services in driving the success of local chambers. How will we achieve that?
Well, that's a really easy answer. 100%. They have to be a member of a local or provincial chamber in order to participate in any of the offerings. So the SME Institute will obviously exist in a separate place. It'll be obviously powered by the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, but it'll have a separate entry point. But of course, access to any of the services are dependent on someone having a company having a membership in a local chamber, because of course they work hand in glove. There are things that local chambers do that we can't do as a Canadian chamber. So it's about the blend of all the assets, and we want to reinforce that.
Mariel, and possibly Carl, this is very much in your court here. Ken Cobley again. I believe that you mentioned a change to the CCC board structure, which I imagine means downsizing. Will the representatives from the provincial chambers still remain on the board if you do trim the size of the Canadian Chambers board? Mario, you're going to be chairing the Nom and Gov committee, and obviously changes in the structure will have to come back to the AGM. What are your thoughts as you begin this exercise?
Well, first, I was hoping to sail off into the sunset, and now I'm realizing that this is another big lift. But seriously, your point is very well taken, Ken, and it's inconceivable to me that the board does not have representation from the network. Now, some large corporate members want in, some small, we want more voices of diversity, smaller businesses, more input from the network. So how can we be creative? I think that we'll need to unbundle a few issues. We need an efficient working board. So not everybody wants to sit in and read minutes and give Perrin and Gayla an extra $20 for this and 20. So part of it is the mechanics of running the organization. That's one of the functions. Part of it is our fiduciary duty to our members, which includes local chambers and the members here at the AGM, and also the corporate members. So we have a responsibility to both. Part of it is bringing the voices into the market voices and business voices into the chamber. So when we go back to our stakeholders, we can talk more confidently, more powerfully, that we're aligned with what's being said and the needs that are out there in the marketplace. And I also think that the onus is on us as a Canadian chamber to provide yet more value to our members, both from the network and corporate members. So content or data is one area, for example. So if there's policy work that's done in Ottawa and we could have, let's say, a New Brunswick slice of it, I'm pretty sure that would be very helpful to our colleagues in Moncton and Edmundston and Fredericton and St. John and so on and so forth. So if there are others, like if Alberta is, and to Barry's point, is already on some initiatives. So I don't know what the answer at this point is to the question, but I do know that there are baseline principles that will not change. So even if the form changes and we have a more modern board, and to Gayla's point, if we don't change, change will be imposed upon us. It's getting harder and harder to recruit people who want to travel across the country and to give 2 days every quarter and pay their way and leave their organizations and so on. So we need to find a format that speaks to now, based on the principles of the Canadian Chamber that are not changing, they're simply evolving and getting more modern. So we'll call upon you, Ken, for answers to your own question, probably.
and maybe Mario, I can add to this. I think, this is not something that's going to be done in vacuum. This is an exercise that's going to be done within the board itself. So, led by the committee, but it is an exercise where every board member is going to be parts and parcels of this. And we've been conducting surveys on effectiveness of the board over the last, I think, 2-3 years. And it's been pretty unanimous that everyone says, well, I think this board can be more functioning better, more efficient. We can improve the engagement of directors on the board. And obviously, anyone who's tried to chair a board of 53 members will tell you that it's not an easy task. And therefore, we have, and we're going back now to in-person meetings, we will have, an immense pool of talent, that is available once every quarter for 2 days. Take that brain power and make the most of it and make it as efficient as possible, as effective as possible, to give Gala, to give Parent, to give the management the tools they need and the insight they need to be able to develop the chamber. That is really the thought process behind making the governance more efficient. And I can honestly say this is where we're going into this without any preconceived idea on who's in, who's out, who's what is the number, what is not the number. This is a positive and very open-minded exercise.
I might just add to that as well, Carl, that our starting point, Ken, is going to be to talk to the directors themselves. And really 2 questions. The first is, how, in your view, can we be the most effective as a board, as a Canadian Chamber board? The second is, how can we make your time on the board most effective? Because we're asking all of the representatives on the board to give of their time and their resources to be able to participate. And we want to make sure that they find it a time that's well spent and an investment that's a good investment. And starting point as it relates to provincial and territorial reps is to talk to them and to get their input and to get your input and our colleagues' input from the provincial and territorial CEOs as well. So there'll be a lot of outreach on that over the course of the next year. Central, though, to our plan, our structure, our philosophy is that the network is core to our activities. Let's go to the next question, which is from Rory and Sault Ste. Marie. Rory asks, how will operations be developed? Gail, this is to you. How will operations be developed to support the brand through technology adoption, human resources acquisition and training, capitalizing transformation, et cetera, to ensure the brand value and promise is delivered consistently?
Well, I think that I would start by saying that a brand is based on what you experience. It's based on a relationship that you build. So we all judge companies by what we experience. So if it's a department store, it doesn't matter what they advertise. When you go there, you have to have that experience for the brand to really deliver. So what we're looking for at every single contact point, and a lot of them are going to be powered by technology. It goes without saying that, if we're going to connect with next generation leaders, we're going to know where they are, where they want to connect with us. It's not about us deciding that. It's about us knowing that we're where they are. And so what we want to convey is that the customer journey, the way that they find us, the way that they want to interact with us, all of that is going to be bespoke. And of course, it's going to be powered by technology because that's where they are. So I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Gail. Next one's for you too. Mark Bell asks, is the plan for the data hub to provide chambers with regional economic data that can be used to assist in local advocacy?
Absolutely. And I just want to say that we just hired our new chief economist, Stephen Tapp, and he's been working together with Statistics Canada and our team here to put this together. And he has an incredible background, and he has been looking at every single aspect of this. So we are going to be providing insights and data that is best in class, and that's absolutely going to be driven by making sure it's regionalized, by making sure it's relevant to every sector. And as everybody knows, data doesn't do anything. What we have to do is lift it off the page and provide insights. So part of that is the hires that we're going to make. We have a number of hires with this hub, and those folks are going to put together the insights that are going to make this useful to business.
Really important question here, submitted anonymously. How do you envisage this new mission, vision, and look of the CCC reaching and supporting the local chambers to help us increase our presence and membership? I believe many chambers struggle with a reputation of being outdated. But again, I'll turn to Gayla and to the others as well on this, but I would start by saying it's a problem with the chamber movement in so many areas throughout Canada, including the Canadian Chamber. We've heard from you before that too often we were seen by your members across the country on Main Street as simply representing big business. We want to make sure that we represent the dynamism of the 98% of Canadian businesses that are SMEs. We want to make sure that we can reach out to next generation entrepreneurs. Gayla was mentioning that earlier. In the surveying that we were doing with them, the focus groups that we did with them, what we heard was they often had a hard time understanding what it was the chamber movement was offering to them. And is what we're offering contemporary and valuable? Is it evolving to change with the times? And so what we want to do is to ensure that your association with the Canadian Chamber provides resources to you that will help you to be more relevant and modern and useful in your own communities in exactly the same way as we worked together during the pandemic. And we want to assist you because your success on Main Street Canada is critical, it's integral to our success nationally. But let me turn it over to Gayla and to my other colleagues here.
I just develop on what you said, Perrin. Your brand is not what you say, your brand is what you do. And if we just put out a flashy new brand and didn't change what we were going to offer, then it wouldn't make any difference. So we have to show up to all of our audiences with what they need, what's the most relevant tool to support their success. And that is why a lot of the offerings that we're launching are going to communicate that. They're going to say, we get you. We know what you need to succeed. And so I would say that as much of our brand is in what we're going to do as in what we're going to say. And then additionally, we also want to say you're part of our house. So there's lots of rooms in this house and you're going to be part of that house. And one of the ways we're going to do it is to show diversity of the country in terms of diversity of the business leaders. And that's in every way a diversity and inclusion message that's really critical, that we show all of the businesses and all of the leaders that we support so that people say, I'm a part of this house.
Mario, you're looking as if you'd like to add.
I'll chime in. I thought of two things maybe that could contribute or chip into the answer for this very important question. One, I do think what we can provide to local chambers to make them more relevant. One point I do think is content. I do think that the more we know about the economy, the more you can pass on to your local memberships around what's going on, and meaningful content, not some national trend that does not apply, let's say, to New Brunswick or to First Nations communities or to what happens in downtown Toronto. Might be relevant for other major cities, but less so in peripheral economies. So how can we provide value, the Canadian Chamber, to our members, and how can local chambers provide more value to your membership? I think through content. There are issues that small businesses are facing, as you're well aware of. I'll use one, owner managed and succession planning. When should you sell your business? When you, so this leads to my second point. The Canadian Chamber then can serve as a great connector between businesses. So if I'm in the dry cleaning business and I own 4 dry cleaning facilities, the Canadian Chamber probably can connect me with one somewhere in Canada that sold their businesses, that they had 4 dry cleaning facilities and they had a suitor and they had a bunch of questions and they were searching for a bunch of answers. If you're in the IT sector and you're building an information platform, well, the Canadian Chamber can probably connect one of your members to some other member somewhere in Canada. So provide meaningful content to your members, being a great connector within the businesses, not just small amongst themselves, regionally connected, Canada-wide connected, small to medium and small to large connections, and also large corporates can learn from the small and vice versa. So I think there's some room to grow, but I agree with Gayla, the proof's in the pudding, and we'll need to deliver on those things.
Time is fast running out. We have a number of questions here. Let's try to get through three just very quickly if we can.
Oh, sorry, I was.
So, Carl, did you want to add?
No, I just wanted to say I need to keep us all on time here. I'm looking at time 12:27. We probably have time for one last short question. I don't know, Perrin, if that's what you were saying. Sorry, I was on mute.
No, what I was saying was let's see if we can squeeze three in between now and 12:30.
Okay.
Which means that all of us, starting with me, have to be much shorter.
Right.
First one, you've spoken often, and this is directed to me, I guess. You've spoken often about the network being the Canadian Chamber's unfair advantage. What do you mean by that? And how does this plan strengthen local chambers across the country? I think we've touched on the latter half of the question of how it will strengthen local chambers. What do I mean by the unfair advantage? It means that when I go in to meet with any government official and sitting down with a cabinet minister and they say, who do you represent? My answer is 200,000 businesses of all sizes and sectors in every region of the country, including X number in your constituency, Minister. The local rootedness, the success of local chambers is critical to our success. No other organization can make that claim. That's our unfair advantage. Next one, Gayla, you can answer, but you can elaborate on it, but the answer is yes, starting with next year. The question is when CCC, CCEC conferences resume in person, with the impact of revenue restrictions for many chambers across the country since 2020, will there be consideration when selecting venues and accommodations so it's more accessible to members? Gayla.
Absolutely. And you're going to see that with our next AGM in particular. We've really looked at the accommodations based on an affordable price point.
Final question, Gayla. John Hopkins at the Regina Chamber, our friend, asked, how up to date will the information be? Will it be tied Stats Canada data so that as Stats Canada information changes, so does ours?
I would really like us to be able to send something out to the network that's very specific on this, but I can tell you from a high level that the number of sources that this data is coming from is significant. So this will be layer upon layer of data. And again, want to go back to the fact that it'll be all about the insights. So Stephen and his team will be interpreting all of this information in a way that you can use immediately that people can understand.
Thanks. Okay, it's 12:29. Back to you, Carl.
Thank you, Perrin. I think we're going to finish this right on the dot, and I'd like to thank Mary Jane, Dominic from Hambley and Woolley for their great work on our brand, and for taking the time to present today. I also want to thank you, Perrin, Mario, and Gayla for your participation today at this panel and for taking the questions. Merci à tous pour votre soutien et votre confiance. Et je vous souhaite une bonne continuation aujourd'hui lors de cette assemblée et lors de cette journée de conférence. So thank you for your support